Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Everyday Landscapes. Today I'm in Bedfordshire and I'm shooting an autumnal scene at the Sharpenhoe Clappers. So if you would have watched the previous video, you would have seen me down in a local farmer's field shooting a hedgerow with a lot of lovely autumnal trees dotted along it. And in that video, I made reference to the Clappers because I was right next to it. And I'm actually up on the Clappers now, and the Clappers is essentially just a big hill. I believe in sort of Iron Age times there was a fort up here, but now there's just a lot of really nice trees. So I've basically come along here and I found this avenue of trees which I've seen many times because I've walked up here many times. And because we're in peak autumn, we've got some really lovely colours at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a crack at shooting this avenue of trees. So I don't have a wide angle lens. The widest I've got is a 24mm, which is on this 24-105 I have here. And this scene actually calls for a bit more of a wide shot because you've got this row of tree trunks down the left-hand side and then the overarching branches down the right, or leading over from left to right. So what I'm actually doing here to compensate that, and you might find me doing this quite a lot, is shooting a panoramic image. So I'm going to shoot a pano, probably a 5 or 6 image pano, which will then give me the width from left to right, which I want to get this shot in. Now there are some considerations here with this shot. I could have gone the other side, so I could have come and shot back up the hill. But that would have given me the tree trunks on the right hand side as opposed to the left hand side. And as we read from left to right, it actually feels more comfortable for an image to go from left to right. So it's more comfortable for us to see the trees on the left and the branches arching over to the right than the trees on the right and the branches arching back over to the left. Now sometimes you can't help it and you have to shoot the other way, but in this instance, if I can, then that's what I'm going to do. So there are some issues that we probably need to discuss here with regards to this shot. A couple in particular. The first is that we've got a lot of blue sky on the left hand side behind the very far left trunk, and also in between a couple of them, which will be distracting, and we may need to take that out in post. And there'll also be little dots of blue all over the top coming over to the right, where there's gaps in the canopy. So we may have to look at that in post. And the other issue is because it's a very bright sunny day, there's hardly any clouds in the sky, and it's about, what time is it? Let's have a look. It's 10 o'clock in the morning, so the sun's up a little bit even though we're in November. Is that we're getting very harsh highlights on some of the trunks here, so we've got to be really careful not to blow those out, and again we'll have to deal with those in post. So there's a couple of issues there that we need to look at. And while I've been stood here actually taking the shot from this angle, I've had a thought that it might look a little bit better if I move over and concentrate on these really nice roots that are sort of above the ground. Come a bit lower, come a bit closer to the roots and shoot. So I've got more of a narrow angle on the line of trees, but I'm focused in a lot more on the roots. And maybe if I can get lower as well, I can get some more interest in these lovely leaves that are on the floor, so I can get a little bit more detail on those as well. So I'm going to keep this shot that I've taken because I may use it, but I'm also now going to come over, get a bit lower, get a bit closer and shoot across that way to see if I can really emphasize, because I think that the main thing for me here that I want to be looking at really are these roots. That's kind of the thing that makes this a bit of a unique shot. Okay, so I've repositioned myself now, got myself down a little bit lower. Now you may have seen me faffing about a little bit with the tripod while I was repositioning, and the reason I'm doing that is because when you shoot a panoramic image, you need to get the tripod absolutely level, otherwise your image just won't work. Even if you get the ball head or whatever head you use level, as soon as you start moving across, you're going to lose that because your tripod isn't level. Now some tripods or some ball heads now come with self-levelers and etc, etc. I don't have that, so I have to rely on getting my tripod level first to make sure that my panoramic image is level and gets in everything that I need. So I've taken that shot now. I've got a couple of shots in the bag here. Let's get it home. Let's get it on the computer. Let's have a look at processing it. So here we are back at the computer. Let's have a look at the composition that I chose, and let's have a look at the editing process to get to the final image. So this is the image that I selected, and as you can see, it's the one where we're closer to the exposed roots. Now, it was a 5-shot panoramic image at 24mm, and as you can probably see as well, the ISO is up a little bit from the base because I needed to get a slightly higher shutter speed to freeze the motion in the leaves, as it was a rather windy day. And that's quite a dark image, this one, you probably noticed, but we're not clipping the blacks at all anywhere, so we'll be able to pull that out with the basic adjustments. And here are the basic adjustments, and as you can see, again, they're on the right hand side. If you want to pause and have a look, I'm not going to go through each one individually, and it has pulled the details out really rather nicely. Now this one needed a lot of work in Photoshop really before we bring it back into Lightroom to do those final bits of editing, and that's where we're going to go next. So there's quite a bit actually that gets done here in Photoshop. Now I've created several layers so you can see step by step what I've done, and I'll switch each layer on one at a time and then explain to you what's going on. Now the first step was to do something with this area here on the top left corner. It's quite bright and your eye will be drawn to that every time if we don't do something about it. So essentially what I did was I come down to here on this right hand side in the middle and just took a square of this detail out and pasted it over onto the left, and then used an adjustment layer or a masking layer just to mask back in the tree, and made a few refinements to this, like I enlarged it slightly and just dropped the opacity a little bit. The next area of interest or concern for me was this really bright blown out area here. Now, if you remember, while we were on location, I was mentioning that there were quite a lot of strong highlights on the bark, on the trunks of these trees, and this was probably the worst offender. So what I did here was just did a little bit of cloning, just to tone that back down. Now there are some other areas up here, but I decided to leave them alone because I don't think they're too offensive, but that one was just slightly too bright. Now I had envisaged this image to be a lot more of a letterbox image than is currently showing here. So I wanted to crop a little bit off the bottom, but to do that I need to remove this log or this exposed root here, and also some of this exposed root here, because I don't want to be cropping across the bottom and then leaving something going out of the scene. So that was the next job, just use a little bit of content aware fill just to remove these bits here of exposed root. Okay, and then the final stage in Photoshop was just to remove a little bit of this blue from around the canopy here on the right hand side, and also between these two trees here. And that was done essentially with a little bit of cloning and some spot healing. So I'll just turn that layer on, and you can see we've just not totally eliminated it, but just removed it to a point. And then this was all saved back into Lightroom. So the first thing I did back in Lightroom was add a vignette, and then I just made some slight adjustments to the blue and aqua luminance and saturation levels, just to make the sky a little bit less obvious by making it a little bit less blue and a little bit lighter. I then added a radial filter into this area here and just lightened it up ever so slightly, so it's slightly lighter and your eyes are drawn more into the center of the image, so hopefully it will draw you through the shot. And then I also duplicated that, inverted it, and ever so slightly darkened, and I think decontrasted the area around it. So hopefully it's very subtle, but hopefully you can see there's a slight change in the lightness going through there. The next thing I wanted to do was just to bring up the clarity and the sharpness in the foreground a little bit. So I did that by using a linear gradient, pulling up from the bottom upwards, and then just adding a bit of clarity and a bit of contrast, and that just sharpened up that foreground. And then finally, I just pulled up the whites and the highlights a little bit just to raise the image up. I felt it was a little bit dark. And then I cropped it as I'd suggested previously in Photoshop, just to give it much more of a letterbox aspect ratio. And that left us with our final image. So I hope you've enjoyed that process of going out, finding the composition, taking the image, coming home and processing it. You know, Sharpenhoe Clapper is a lovely place just on my doorstep, and I'm sure you guys have got places very similar on your doorstep that you can go and find. And that's what Everyday Landscapes is about, because we can't all get out, like I've said before, and go to these, you know, national parks and honeypot locations. So, you know, it's really important to get out there locally, get your practice in, and then when you finally get to one of these bigger, more grandiose places, you'll be in a much better position to take very good images. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.